Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. That's Bizzarro. For anyone who's out there, you can find us on Instagram at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs. You can also find us at Gorilla Brave. That is our community. You can find that on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and wherever else might be out on social media. I don't know where Ivan has it all, but I'm pretty sure we're populated everywhere. Also, you can find me at LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I communicate a lot through Instagram. So if you want to reach out to me, you can text me. My cell phone is on the Better with Bacon Fat Instagram. You can also email me, and you can sign up to be on the show if you want to be on the show. The links are in the episodes, or they're on my Linktree link, or in my bio on all my social media in the link there. So you can sign up. And all the connections to all the podcasts are there. You can find them anywhere: Spotify, YouTube, Pandora, Apple. Apple also has all the episode transcripts. So, with that being said, I have a guest with us from Cleveland, Ohio. I will be making my way to Cleveland, Ohio, actually in the next week, coincidentally. And I have Sonya Patel from Pur Spices Limited. How are you doing today, Sonya?
I'm doing great, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Okay, you mentioned Bed-Stuy a little bit earlier in our pre-production. It's like sticking all the years in New York City. I did live in Astoria for a while, but geez, it has me thinking a lot about those days and doing all the New York City hospitals. Let's talk
Yep.
about you. Let's talk about your story, your background. This show is yours. Take as long as you want, and let's hear about it. I got lots of questions.
Awesome. So I'll give you an overview of kind of my journey into food entrepreneurship. So Justin, we were talking a little bit in pre-production about entrepreneurs and some of those things. So I actually always knew I wanted to go into the field of business. That was something that I was always interested in. I didn't necessarily know that, you know, after whatever multiple years after graduating high school and college that I'd be starting a food business per se, but I did a lot of things along the way to kind of get me set up for what I needed to know and do to be able to start my own company. And so I started as a management consultant, actually, interestingly enough. So did the traditional business school undergrad, did finance and accounting, went into management consulting, and I was fortunate enough to work on some consumer brands that I thought were really interesting. Learned a lot about market research and stuff, which was I thought was I'm like a data nerd too, so which is a good thing and a bad thing, I think sometimes, especially when you're an entrepreneur, because I think a lot of times that you just want to go, not even like worry about the data, right? Because you like kind of operate on your gut. But sometimes it's good to stop and look at data. So I do appreciate my time there. But I realized that as a consultant, I wasn't really having an impact on not, I wouldn't say anything, but not enough of an impact to where I felt it was worth it for doing the amount of work I was doing. Right. So when you're a consultant, you're sort of working for somebody else, giving them ideas, giving them suggestions, what they do with it, it could sit on a shelf for years and years and years so they could implement it. It's kind of up to them. And I felt too far removed from kind of having any sort of mission driven impact. And so after a couple years in consulting, I was like, all right, let me do, something more business related inside a company, right? Maybe I'll have a little bit more of an impact there. So I started working for Mattel, the toy company, in California. So I moved from New York to California, and it was a wild ride, not really having any family there, and then just moving to a brand new city, starting at a brand new job. And Mattel's great. They have a phenomenal family culture and, family friendly culture and things like that. But again, I was doing international strategy for them, so still doing consulting, but I didn't really feel like I was making much of a difference. And so after about a year living in LA, I was like, all right, I'm going to totally shift gears. I was always interested in education and things like that. So I was like, I'm going to go be a teacher. That sounds like a good idea. So I joined Teach for America, moved back to New York, and that's where Bed-Stuy came in. I actually worked in a school in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. It was like a high performing charter school for 2 years, teaching second and third grade. And I will say, till this day, it was the hardest job I have ever had in my life. Way, 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 way harder than, working whatever, 10, 12, 15 hours in consulting. It was, I think from an emotional standpoint, it was definitely very, very challenging. You know, we worked in a very underserved community, seeing a lot of what was happening in the community and then like the kind of the struggles that our students were dealing with. It was it was one of those things that I still think about those kids. And I did that for 2 years, and then my then boyfriend and now husband decided to get married, and he is also from Cleveland, and so I had to move back to Cleveland because his businesses couldn't be anywhere. And so I moved back to Cleveland, and I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do with my life? I was an okay teacher. I was really good at the operations and the business, like not the business side of things, but the operation side of things. So I decided, and I was thinking about some of the challenges. So it kind of goes to this whole entrepreneur business mindset that I think I've always had as a kid. It was like, if I saw a problem, what could I do to fix it? And one of the problems that I saw when I was teaching was that a lot of the kids had a lot of emotional and even physical trauma that they were dealing with. And I was tasked with teaching them math and reading and all these, fundamental skills that obviously are important, but I was tasked to teach it to them when their minds were not in the right place to learn, right? Like, because they were hungry, they were tired, they were dealing with whatever might have happened the night before or that morning, or the challenges of getting to school on time and all these other things that, when I was growing up, like, are just, that were just so challenging and difficult to be in the right mindset to be able to then sit down and think about, okay, I need to learn how to do this math problem. I need to learn how to read. And so one of the things that I was doing in the classroom when I was actually teaching was doing a little bit of mindfulness and yoga. And so when I moved to Cleveland, I was like, you know what? There was this problem where the students weren't necessarily ready to learn. So what can I do to help that piece of the puzzle, right? Like, what can I do? Because I truly saw that as a big problem. So actually, when I moved back to Cleveland in 2010, I started a nonprofit called Zenworks Yoga that does yoga and mindfulness in schools. So we went to underserved schools, and we still the organization still exists. I sit on the board still, and we go to underserved schools and we do yoga and mindfulness for students, and we provide resources for teachers, for their families, and we do a lot of other community outreach. And I did that for 10 years, running the organization. And then in 2019, and this is where my food journey starts. I you know, we were I was in this position where Zenworks was kind of running. It was, it was growing. I kind of I I unfortunately have this bug where like every 10 years I decide I want to do something different. And so, I was getting close to my 10-year mark with Zenworks, and my kids at the time also have, you know, both of my children actually have severe food allergies. And so I was in this weird position where I was kind of getting an itch to do something different. I'm spending a lot of time with my kiddos' food allergies, trying to find safe foods for them, making safe foods for them at home, and thinking about, how do I, you know, like use my time in a way that I felt was, worth it to me, right? Because like Zenworks was definitely worth it, but I was kind of getting to the point where I was like hitting my edge. And so I started Pure Spices actually in 2019, and it was like completely on a whim. I was making harissa sauce at home because when my husband and I lived in New York together, we couldn't actually find any good harissa. Like we found good harissa in New York, but when we came back to Cleveland, we couldn't find anything good. I started making it at home, and then friends and family were like, "Oh, this is really good." And then the same thing happened with our masala paste where I was, making a recipe at home, and it was mostly for my kids to find something that was top allergen free because they're allergic to nuts and wheat. And a lot of the stuff on the shelf they can't eat. And so I started making it home, and then it was like, "Oh, can I have a jar? Can I have a jar?" Like people would ask me, "Can I have a jar?" I was like, "Okay, there's something to this, right?" And so I joined an incubator in 2019, and my thought was, if I win the pitch competition, I'm going to move forward with this. If I don't, then whatever, we'll see, right? Like maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe it's something that I think about down the road. Well, I won the pitch competition. And I was like, okay, now I kind of feel like I have to do something with this because I won. And then, yeah, summer of 2019. The pitch ended in, I think it was like middle of February. And then by summer 2019, we had our product at the first farmer's market. So it went like, I sort of operate like that. Like if I get an idea, I just kind of jump all in and it's like hyperspeed at that point. And, from 2019 to now, where we do sauces, we do spices, we're launching a new line really soon into snacks. So it's been a crazy adventure getting to this point. I have zero food background, but the way I look at things is like if I see a problem, I feel the need to solve it. And that's kind of how I operate.
Okay, let's talk about this a little bit more in depth.
Sure.
Spices,
Mhm.
things like that. Okay, are like one of the things I want to anchor here is Petridge Farms was started in a similar way. A mother
Yeah.
trying to solve allergy issues for her children, particularly,
Mhm.
and not having any vitamins in white bread was another one.
Yep.
That's before it was
Yep.
enriched white bread, but she stuck to
Yep.
whole wheat. That's Petridge Farms wasn't cookies at first, guys. It was just basic bread that wouldn't cause an allergy for her children in the Petridge Farm case. So let's take a step back here. You're a teacher.
Mhm.
You're spending a lot of time in schools. You obviously understand allergies and the training and exposure to children in that way, being a teacher, right? Like you saw it every day
Mhm.
for 10 years, particularly in New York City, which for some reason is almost a hyper center, but I don't know if it's food quality, if it's environment or whatever, but there tends to be hyper allergies in more urban environments. But go on.
Yeah, so backtrack though. I worked in the New York schools for 2 years, and then when I ran ZenWorks out of
Hmm.
Cleveland, that was for 10 years.
Yeah.
We did have a couple kiddos with food allergies in my classroom. I remember distinctly there was a kiddo with a dairy allergy when I was teaching. I had him for 2 years, and he had a dairy allergy, and the school it's funny, I can't even remember what the protocols were, but I know when my kiddos were in school in the elementary and now as they're growing older, the landscape has changed dramatically from for food allergies. I will say when my daughter was younger, so when she was 4 years old, she was in preschool and she had a severe, severe, severe anaphylactic reaction to the point where it was one of those scary situations that I pulled, the doctor when we were at the ER out of the room and I was like, do whatever explicit you need to do to make sure she stays alive because she she had eaten something that was given to her by mistake. The EpiPen was in lock and key. We couldn't get it. We couldn't find the key because the nurse had left. I mean, it was a really scary situation. And then my daughter's also anaphylaxed a couple times when we've been on vacation, and the restaurants have said, okay, this is safe, and it's not, and then it doesn't end up being safe. And so it's that feeling of not knowing what's in your food and that anxiety that comes with for people that have food allergies of not knowing whether something was mixed in accidentally, whether or not the manufacturer has the right protocols in place. It's really, really scary. And so for me, one of the biggest things in terms of why I do what I do and the way we do it, we self manufacture everything. Is it a pain? Yes, absolutely. Do I wish I didn't have to? 99% of the days, yes, I wish I didn't have to because it's a lot of work. But it wasn't an option for us, and there was no way that I was willing to compromise the quality and, like, the safety standards that we have in place to make sure that that our food stays allergen free. And so, like, so in 2022, towards the end of 22, we ended up leaving our shared kitchen because we would spend hours just sanitizing the whole thing before we would be able to produce when we were in a shared kitchen. And so we ended up going to our own facility. I mean, we built out our own facility to be able to produce in a way that we knew that there was no cross contact. We didn't have to worry about other companies bringing in ingredients that weren't safe. And so that is one of our pillars that we will not sway from, even for our new backline. Like we will be 100% top allergen free. Like that's a non-negotiable for us. And that's why, and then unfortunately, that's why we haven't been able to do co-packing because those facilities just don't exist. And so the allergy thing, that's my why for Pure Spices. And that's, and it's interesting. My kids are so much more vested in the business than they ever. I mean, obviously they're older now too, but like they're so much more interested, invested in the business too, because they know that it's helping kids like them, it's helping families like ours, and I think they feel a sense of pride that we're like actually doing something to help that community, our community, actually, like the food allergy community.
Yeah, I want to say this. I'm going to be very careful on how I say it because I know sometimes, and none of it really makes a lot of sense. And I will tell you in my own experience and losses and miscarriages and things like that, and life and animal losses and family losses. And we go through losses and personal losses, whatever jobs, whatever
Mhm.
businesses. In some cases, they are an opportunity. They are God giving us a gift for our family legacy. And are there sacrifices and is there pain? Yeah, there always is in life, and there are things that are set us backwards, or we
Mhm.
feel that they do. But I think one of the things that I've tried to learn in life is that sometimes the setbacks are the opportunities.
Mhm.
We can talk about attention deficit disorder or AHAD or dyslexia, and a lot of individuals before there was ever diagnosis ended up being very successful individuals. Now there's probably 90% of the individuals who didn't end up successful because they didn't figure out a way around it. But sometimes obstacles are opportunities. They're not
Mhm.
always, unless we have the right environment. One of the things I want to emphasize is there's a lot of individuals that react to these situations that it's to them. In your case, it is happening to you. Okay.
Mhm.
But, but in a way, you've reacted in a for you temperament, which is okay. I'm having to do this anyway. This is my
Mhm.
life. This is the
Mhm.
trajectory of my life, whether I like it or not. This
Mhm.
is going to be part of my legacy because I am having to deal with it. Now, what happens if I make it the thread of my existence? That's Pepperidge Farms. And why is that important, guys? Because it is a good business model. Many, 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 many successful humans have done it. We're watching it right now. We saw it
Mhm.
way back in the earlier episodes, guys, where we're just beginning with Back to the Basics 101. She did something similar. Her father, her husband, excuse me, and family have been farmers forever. And she all of a sudden has 3 kids with allergies. And she's trying to do the opposite of what her husband and family traditionally had done in wheat and things, and try to bring back everything into a wheat product. So there is purpose here, guys. God is giving us purpose in these. Sometimes we have to look at it. Doesn't mean beat someone over the head with it, but it does mean steadfast in your journey, and the skills that you're collecting in your personal life is also skills that may be necessary to move forward the life of others, not just your own
Mhm.
family. So let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about, okay, we have something viable here. People are asking for it. You do an incubator school. Explain to me that, why the decision, why do that? Why not just go mentorship? Why not just start the business? Why take a pause to do the
Yep.
incubator?
So for sauces that you want to be shelf stable, you actually it's not like and every state is different, but I think pretty much across the board, at least in the US, you have to have a commercial kitchen to be able to produce what's we call like an acidified food, right? So our sauce is shelf stable, so we have to add a certain amount of acid, like, it has to be cooked a certain way and it has to be done in a commercial kitchen. So that in itself was one of those things that I was like, well, I don't own a commercial kitchen, and started doing some research and found out how expensive it would be to build out a commercial kitchen, and I didn't have any knowledge in food production, right? Like I'm going from my parents, my father is a businessman, but he was more in like medical devices, and then he was helping my uncle's business in the States, but that was like heavy manufacturing. My husband's family is all hotels. in real estate. And so like I do not come from a family of food per se. I mean, we love eating, but not from a family that manufactures food or farmers or any sort of anything in the ecosystem of food, actually. And so for me, it was like, I need to go learn, right? I need to go figure out how to do this. And in Cleveland, I was lucky that we actually had an incubator. It was a 7-week class, kind of how to start your food business. And it was fairly inexpensive. Actually, it was like very inexpensive. And so for $500, I could sit in this class and learn, once a week, I would go to this class and learn how to start a food business. And if it was something that, could be viable, it was tied to their shared kitchen. And so that like commercial kitchen space was already certified by the Ohio Department of Agriculture. It was already on the FDA's list for a food facility that you could produce out of. So that truly eliminated a lot of barriers that would have otherwise been there to start a food business from scratch. The alternative, what other people do is they go to a co-packer, right? So they have their recipe. It's something that, they're producing. They'll try to go to a co-packer or a company and say, "Hey, can you help me make this? Maybe I need help refining my recipe." But the problem with that is, one, you're starting with, usually a lot of those co-packers want big minimum quantities, right? So they'll tell you, "Hey, you need to produce like a couple thousand in each run." And I wasn't necessarily ready to take that risk because I didn't know if this was going to go anywhere, right? Like again, I trusted my gut that this could be something, but I had no proof of concept at all. And so to me, doing that incubator and going the shared kitchen space route was actually like the least costly and the least path to resistance, right? Like it was the easiest way to get in to test something. I could make small batches, go to the farmers market, try to sell them, get instant feedback. So, and I didn't have to invest too much money. It was like a much easier way to get in.
Yeah, I did the co-packing on acidified foods. It's not an easy
Mhm.
business, and it's different than co-packing a lot of other things. The balance, pH balance, stuff like
Yep.
that, shelf stability. We talk about in other shows, guys, that things will blow up on a shelf if you don't have the balance right. There is a chemical experiment that goes on in acidified foods. That's part of the reason it tastes so good, is all of that energy and action is going on in your palate.
Yes, absolutely. And just
The,
food safety, right? Nobody wants
yeah,
to get sick. You don't want
exactly.
to get anyone sick.
There is that, and I agree. There's half pallet or whole pallet minimums, so those are a lot to take on. That does happen in consumer packaged goods for sure. Let's talk about, you take the class, you get the knowledge, you have recipes, right? You probably have to scrub them a little bit. You probably have to commercialize them, as it's called on that side of the business when you go into co-packing, because not every household recipe is food safe and commercial safe and has the right pH levels or acidity levels or whatever you want to call it. So let's talk
So
about navigating all of that.
yeah, and it's funny that you say that, and I would almost argue it's not. I mean, yes, like so my recipe was already, from a pH perspective and the food safety perspective, it was already actually safe. And the funny thing is, I did, do some inquiry with a couple co-packers to find out, hey, what would this cost to make it, if to have you make it and jar it and all that for us, right? And it's it's funny because they wanted to bring the cost down, right? So, like, we use whole garlic, we use real lemon juice, we use real lemon zest. So the quality of product that we're like, the ingredients that we're using are all things that you can find in your house. But a co-packer oftentimes will try to substitute ingredients in order to help bring the cost down, right? And so that's when you talk about commercialization, I'm actually using the same like household recipe that we started with because I mean, obviously it was already food safe, so it was fine. But when we went to a co-packer, they were like, well, we're going to use garlic, like granulated garlic powder, right? And we'll use like lemon concentrate. We're not going to use lemon juice. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that, right? And like a lot of times they'll add stabilizers, they'll add different things to your recipe because it brings the cost down. And I was not willing to budge on it. So aside from top allergens, we don't use any chemical additives or preservatives. So I did not want any thickeners. I did not want any flavors per se, right? I didn't want any gums or any of that stuff just because to me that's not what I wanted my products to be, right? Not, I mean, again, everyone makes their own choices in terms of what their product is going to be. But so we, yeah, so it's a little bit of a catch-22 because our product, it makes it a little bit more expensive to produce, right? But I'm hoping that people see that even though it's a little bit more expensive, that quality is makes up for it, right? And that taste makes up for it. But we went back and forth a couple times with a couple different, co-packers and kind of investigated, but it wasn't aligning with our values, so we kind of decided against it. And then we just scaled our recipes with the help of that commercial kitchen. So the commercial kitchen that we were renting space out of had someone in charge of like the smaller companies to help them with their productions. And so he had experience in scaling food businesses. And so he helped us. And then typically, if you have an acidified food, you have to have someone write your process out for you to say, this is the ingredients, this is how much you're going to put in it, this is how you're going to produce it, this is how you're going to measure all those values that you need to measure. So they're always available if we have questions or anything like that in terms of, new recipes or anything that we're working on. So there's a lot of people there to help, but you just have to, I think as a food entrepreneur, you really think about like, what do you care about, right? Like, and what matters to you in terms of what you're producing, what you're putting out there.
Yeah, because it's all of it adds up to then you have to generate a label. And whether we
Yep.
understand it or not in the consumer packaged good business, every hurdle is actually a step towards making sure it goes on the shelf properly. It's a different game than serving in a restaurant. There's a lot of different, because it sits so long, because it's
Mhm.
transported, because it's
Mhm.
not eaten in a reasonable amount of time, because it falls outside of what we would call the normal household food safety regulations that we just all have because we deal with low quantities and we don't risk cross contamination generally because we cook so fast in our homes.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's like cottage law, right? Which is
yeah.
like you can make it in your house as long as the health inspector comes by and says everything looks reasonable. But unfortunately, acidified foods don't fall under cottage law.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about next steps here. You do the
Yep.
label, you decide how you're going to jar it, you decide how you're going to bring it to market. You've got to design a logo, a name.
Hmm.
How do you then, now you have a quantity of food. I don't even know how much what your minimums are, but let's just, whatever your minimums are, you have that on you. How do you begin to market and build this company? You have a product. You obviously were working on it as you were developing your recipe. I'm assuming everything was in motion.
It
So
was
let's talk
everything
about it.
happened. Yep. Everything happened all at the same time. So as soon as I was like, as soon as I graduated that course, I was like, okay, we're moving forward with this. So started working on the design of the label. We actually we worked with that first label that we did was actually, and our logo was actually done by like an artist at a local smoothie shop. So, it truly was like something that started very, very low budget, just again, getting a minimal viable product out there, right? Something that was safe to sell and that we could get feedback on. So we produced three flavors at that time. So we had an original harissa that was like our spicy one. We had one that had mint in it, and then we had one that had cilantro in it. And our first batches were like 120 bottles, I think. That was it. That's what we started with. It was like a small 25-gallon kettle. We made we made 120 bottles, got the labels printed. We used a lot of times universities will actually help you with you pay a fee, but they'll help you with the process, like to make sure that whatever you're making is done in a safe way. They'll help with the label also. They'll help with the nutritional facts. So there's a lot of food programs out there at especially like a lot of the state universities have them because they have an agriculture department, and then even some of the private universities that have big food and agriculture departments have programs that are open to non-students, so that are just open to the community, that you can get resources from, that you can have them look at your, recipes and ingredients, and you can even brainstorm with them. Honestly, the so far I've worked with like three or four universities, and everyone's been very kind. They want to see you succeed, and so they'll help you along the way. So we made our first batches, and then we also, sorry, so we started with that, and then yeah, and then the first markets we did were farmers markets. So local farmers markets in our community in Cleveland. So we did that for the first part of, or the second half of 2019, essentially, and then we we had our own website as well. So we were allowed to sell on our website. Acidified foods typically have like a 18-month to 2-year shelf life. So, and it's shelf stable, so I didn't have to worry about things going bad as we were shipping it. So I could ship to friends and family across the country, and that was no problem at all. The one challenge we ran into was that we were using glass bottles. We are still using glass bottles, so shipping is quite expensive. I didn't think about that. So like, I think about now, like, had I started this business with the knowledge I have now, I probably would have done some things differently, right? Like thinking about what's the right size, what's the right, should I have put it in a pouch maybe? I don't know. Pouches would have been so much cheaper than glass bottles are and things like that. But yeah, so we did farmers markets, we had our website. And then towards the end of 2019, we we listed on Amazon. And the reason we listed on Amazon is because sort of my journey took me to a lot of different, cities. I lived in New York, I lived in Boston, I lived in LA. I had a lot of like network outside of the Cleveland area. And my friends were basically like, "Hey, just put this on Amazon. That's where we shop." And at that time, it was actually quite easy to list on Amazon, and you could even, do it yourself. I didn't hire an agency or anything like that. And I put our things on Amazon, and we had some slow growth. It was going okay, but then COVID hit. So now we're in the beginning of 2020, COVID hit and things just exploded. And you talk about sort of, I mean, not a silver lining, but it was one of those things that I don't think I could have ever anticipated. But with everything shutting down and everyone cooking at home, like our sales grew to a point where we couldn't keep up with demand. And so we were constantly low on inventory. We were constantly out of stock. And it was just one of those things that I think we got on Amazon, and COVID happened, and our company grew at a pace that we didn't expect. And I don't know if we could have replicated that growth had those events not happened. Right? I think that was actually one of those things that there was no way that I could have predicted that. And so then we started selling on Amazon. We continue selling on Amazon, and it's actually one of our biggest channels right now. Yeah. Because we've built that base over the last, 4 or 5 years. So that's been kind of interesting. And it's weird because most food companies don't have that route. Most food companies do farmers markets, they get, discovered by buyers, or they start talking to buyers in their local grocery stores, and then they get placed in grocery stores first. And then Amazon's kind of an afterthought. We are in some grocery stores, but it wasn't necessarily our biggest, you know, it wasn't our biggest goal, let's say that. Like we didn't have that. We didn't go into this thinking like, "Oh, I want to be on the shelf of Whole Foods," or, whatever.
Yeah, I understand. I think it's a very natural progression, and listening to letting the business, well, it's an extension of us in some ways as entrepreneurs, letting it be no different than
Mhm.
a child. And sometimes it gives us the direction that it needs to go or it's willing to go versus we're trying to force it to go.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's what we're talking about here. And I do agree with you. I think that the shuffling of the world situated certain products and certain businesses better than others, and depending on where you also were in the country as well,
Mhm.
or in the world in this case.
Yep.
So let's talk about a little bit. You're building a business. Let's talk about mentorship. Let's talk about building volume. Let's talk about going from one batch to multiple batches now. Your batch size may grow, I don't know, but you're managing all of this during COVID. Your business is growing, so you've got the stress of what's going on around you, but your business is also growing, and you're already still with the allergies, the pandemic. Now your business is growing. How do you manage all of that during that time and still grow the business? Because obviously we're talking right now, and if you came across my radar, you're doing pretty well. So,
It was wild. It was absolutely wild. And there was, like I said, so, we started, yeah, our batch size grew. We're actually, it's funny, we still only make about 500 bottles a batch. So we're not anywhere near like large scale manufacturing. That being said, during that time, things got crazy. So the first part was, do we even go into this commercial kitchen, right? Because the kitchen was open because other food manufacturers were there, but we were trying to understand, you know, kind of thinking about my kids were home from school, right? In that very beginning. And then do we expose ourselves to other people? I mean, there was so much unknown at that time, right? So there was times when we stopped production altogether and we were just kind of taking it easy, because I think everyone's mentality kind of shifted during that time too, right? Where it was kind of like you're really thinking about like the bigger things in life, right? And so, yeah, our production was definitely up and down. We had some difficulty sourcing. So actually, in the midst of COVID, we decided to launch another product line. So we started with sauces, and all of our sauces come in the same jar, right? Like it's the same size jar. Well, there was a shortage of those jars. So I was like, crap, what do I do now, right? I can't get the jars. I can't make the sauce. Like, what am I going to do? And so we're like, okay, we're going to add spices, right? I was able to get smaller jars. Like, why don't we add dry spices to this mix, right? There was definitely a need still. My kiddos can't use a lot of spice blends from India. We have a running joke in our house that, like we don't let them actually eat anything from India, because it's like, they'll be like, oh, can we have it? I'm like, nope, it's from India, because their manufacturing is so different there that I can't really trust what's on the label. And so because of that bottle shortage, we ended up launching our dried spice line. And again, it wasn't something that I had necessarily planned for, right? But it was one of those things that I was like, I didn't have a choice. If I can't get bottles for our sauces, I can't, that business is not grow. It can't grow. And
And
so,
we went through that as well, actually. We were
yeah,
still in business then, and that glass manufacturer just closed its doors during COVID. It's just like, we're not going
yeah,
to do business. We've been in business a
yep,
long time. Thank you, everyone. We're done. We
yep,
gave our employees a severance package. We're out.
yep.
And the shortage in the businesses that negatively affected was a serious thing, guys. And I understand why they did it, but the ripple effect was enormous for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, no, no. And it's funny because, not funny, but and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but I'm feeling some of those tensions of unknowns right now too, because all of our chili peppers come from Mexico. And a lot of our spices come, I mean, most of our spices come from overseas because they don't really grow spices in the US. And, with the uncertainties of prices, put it that way, every single day I'm thinking in my head, okay, how much do I buy today? How much can I wait? Because it becomes a cash flow problem too, right? Like at that time, even I had like we were not actually buying. Oh no, we had gotten to the point when, actually no, we weren't even buying pallets of bottles at that time. But even thinking about buying pallets of bottles at that time, we couldn't even find it, right? So then we had to, but that's a constant stress of when you're sourcing ingredients from different places, or just even in the US itself, and one of your manufacturers decides, they're not going to manufacture, or something happens, or they shut down, or there's a shortage or something, it really, really, really puts a huge, stress on the supply chain. And it's true. It makes it is a ripple effect. But so we expanded to the dried spices, and then, kind of we did a little bit of that. Sauces, we started getting bottles again, but we got to the point where we were actually not able to produce in the commercial kitchen that we were at, just because of capacity. We weren't able to get in as often as we needed. We weren't able to, it was becoming a very inefficient production. And so that's when, so we did that for about a year and a half. And it was becoming very, very clear that we wouldn't be able to meet the demand that we had. And so that's when, I started really thinking, I was like, okay, is this going to be a hobby where I'm just going in once in a while, producing, kind of making what I can, or is this going to be a business? Right. And if it's going to be a business, and I'm going to invest in a space, then I got to make it work, because now I have, when you're out of a commercial kitchen, your expenses are truly just tied to whatever you're making, right? So like, as long as I was charging more than what it was costing me to make that bottle, that was great. But now, if I was moving into my own space, I had to make enough to keep the lights on too, right? It wasn't just enough to make sure I was paying for my bottles. I had to make sure I was like making enough to keep the lights on, which that's a little bit of a scary leap. Because again, we were doing well, but there's always an ounce of self-doubt in there. Like, will I be able to afford this, right? Will we be able to stay in business? And especially, things were still a little bit up and down, even in 2022, 2023. But I felt like we had enough traction that it was the right leap to take. And so yeah, it became clear that we had outgrown that commercial kitchen. And I know you asked about mentorship and stuff. So we Cleveland is really nice in that it's a big enough city that there's good resources, but it's small enough that people are willing to connect. I think about it a lot because I have some food friends, like food entrepreneur friends in New York City. And then I think about if I had tried to start this business in New York City, I can't even imagine how in the world I would have done that. Like finding a commercial kitchen, driving around the city, picking up the ingredients I needed, like all of that. I can't, like, I can't even imagine what that would look like. Ohio's a little bit calmer. Like you can go to your distributor and pick up stuff right away, easily and throw it, they'll deliver it. You can, like you can find parking. I mean, just little things like that. It's just, it's not, I think about that a lot. It's like, man, I can't imagine having to do this in New York City. But, my point was that Cleveland actually has a pretty robust food community that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So, just even recently over the past year and a half, I think, almost 2 years, we have even a woman in food collective. So there's like 60 women who are all food business owners. Like that's not even just women in food. So does it include restaurant owners? It doesn't, like it literally includes women who are selling a food product at retail, and there's a collective of 60 of us in Cleveland. And so I've definitely leaned in on anyone who has a food company in Cleveland. Like I have no shame in asking them for help, asking for ideas or resources or whatever it is, because again, I came in this completely blind. Like, do I have some business sense? Absolutely. But do I have food business sense? Not really. So I think that's one of the biggest things is, lean into whatever resources that you're able to find in whatever area you're in.
I agree 100%. You mentioned fellowship. I think that's what we're talking about, 60 women in a group,
Mhm.
food entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
specifically consumer packaged goods. Let's talk about this importance of fellowship to you, the importance of community to you, because it obviously matters in building your business. Talk to me about the impact. Let's dive in a little bit more on what this group of women has meant to you.
Oh, absolutely. So we're called Wonder Women of Food Cleveland, and it's a collective. So we actually just, we started as an informal group that met over lunch actually, and realized that we were all facing the same challenges. It's a lot of women who are, single founders. Some are co-packing, some are making it themselves in these commercial kitchen situations. Some are, trying to figure out, do I move out of my commercial kitchen? Do I go in on my own? Hey, can we maybe go in on a kitchen together? Right. So to me, the biggest value that this group has provided, I mean, obviously resources, right? Like we help each other. We've gotten to the point where we have like monthly meetings that are where we bring in speakers to talk to us about different, ideas or different challenges in the food industry, or whether it be marketing, whether it be operations. I actually led a session on Amazon because I'm one of the few that are on Amazon. So I led a session, but it's knowing. So it's two things. One is like the information piece of it, but then it's also the camaraderie, right? Like knowing that I think founder life can be very lonely, and knowing that there's other founders who are in the same space as you, understand your challenges, because the food retail business does have its own challenges, right? And not everyone understands that. And so having people to just bounce ideas off of, we actually, we'll do markets together. So, from a business perspective, helping to bring down costs. I think people are starting to purchase supplies together, but also just, we have a Slack group. So it's even just like, hey, this happened. Is anyone dealing with this too? Right? Like sometimes it's hard to find people who actually understand what you're going through. And I think knowing that you have a community that you can lean in on, knowing that we're all there to help each other, I've I've been blown away, and I absolutely adore the collective. We did our first market, so we had an exclusive, like, market that we did, and we'll be doing another one in the spring, which is really cool. And it's all it's interesting because we have women who are like a lot of them are like me who've done a lot of different careers per se, right? Before they decided to launch a food business. We have some that have been in the food industry for a while. So even just hearing about other people's journeys, it gives you hope, right? Because a lot of businesses don't even make it past like that 5-year mark, but knowing that maybe someone's done it ahead of you, knowing that there's problems that you can overcome and just having someone to talk to, right? I think that in itself helps cuz again, it's entrepreneurship is not an easy route to take. And I think we talked about this in the pre-production, like you can very easily take a 9 to 5 and just collect a paycheck. Because when you start your own business, not that it's a good thing to work 24/7, but typically your business is on your mind 24/7. Whether you want it to be or not, I think it just happens. And I think entrepreneurs have a different mindset that it makes it on your mind 24/7.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Jeez.
Yeah,
It's like a constant job. Peace
it
doesn't mean
is.
so. I don't think peace means anything more than to the entrepreneur, honestly. But
Right, right.
mm,
And we all try to find balance, but
yeah,
it's hard. And like I have a young family, so I had to put down certain stops to say, okay, like so I'll tell you one thing. Like we rely even more heavily on Amazon because my kiddos play soccer and I want to be at their soccer games on the weekends and I can't be at markets then. So if I can't sell my stuff at markets, and I can definitely find other people to run the market for me, but I'm always going to be my best salesperson, right? And so I'd rather spend the money on Amazon to sell versus me giving up my family time and being at a market. So, you have to put your guards down too sometimes.
I'm glad they chose the best sport ever. That's good. We're so anyway. Let's let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about that work-life balance because you are building something. Obviously, as your kids get older, become more independent,
Hmm.
you'll have more life. So I think it's good that as we become entrepreneurs, we have to also understand our merging or our onboarding of a business into our own lives and the balance of that. So that's why I asked the question. So let's dive into balancing all of this now because you
Yeah.
touched on
So
it a little bit.
yeah, absolutely. Balancing life has definitely gotten easier. I would say, and I think part of it is so that it's twofold, right? So the one side of it is not feeling guilty about worrying about your business and working in your business. And I think I don't know if this is a mom thing or a woman thing or how, I don't have research to, say, okay, this happens only to this group of people. But I think for me specifically, I had to let go of this notion that by me working in my business, I was doing a disservice to my children. And for lack of better words, that mom guilt, right? And so once I was able to kind of overcome that mental hurdle, I think it automatically helped me come up with balance and putting up, deciding like what are the things that are important from a family perspective that I want to maintain? And are they feasible within our business scope, right? So, one of the things that I try my hardest is to be home when my kiddos come home from school. I'll log in afterwards, like, I'll do my computer work. So, like, typically I'm at the warehouse. As soon as they leave for school, I'll head over to the warehouse. luckily for us, our productions can happen within that time that my kiddos are at school. So we'll do our production. I have one production assistant that works with me, and then I have my mom who comes in on production days to help. But otherwise, we're able to sort of get done whatever our goal is for that day, we're able to get done, and I'm still able to make it home when the kids get home from school. I try not to take meetings during that time between when they're home from school till about dinner time-ish. I try not to. Sometimes that's just not possible, but, you know, I think the goal for me, what I'm learning is the time that I have set aside for family should be with family, right? I'm really bad about it when it comes to I was managing all of my social media, so I was getting stuck in the checking my Instagram and checking my, you know, some of the social media stuff because I was like, "Oh, I need to post. I need to see what's happening." I was able to bring someone on to help with that, so I that has been a huge lift. So it's also, I think as you grow, you're able to balance as you bring on people, right? So like the thick of it and the hardest was in that those first couple years when I was doing everything myself, right? Like labeling the bottles, packaging the bottles. Like I literally hand labeled, probably, I don't know, tens of thousands. I don't know. Yeah. Like I don't even know how many bottles, but like literally doing everything. And so you feel like you just don't have the time to do anything then. But once I was able to kind of strategically hand off some of those things and thinking about, okay, what are the pieces and parts that no one else can do or I don't want someone else doing that I need to do and focusing my time on that and then kind of handing off the other things, I've realized I've been able to just manage a lot better. The other thing is too, I think my kids are starting to take a certain level of pride and joy in what I'm doing, which is really exciting. And I think that helps too. When your kids understand, or whoever, not your kids, but whoever you're balancing your life with, right? When they start to understand why it's important that you're doing what you're doing, I think, and they start seeing the value in it, I think it also eases that mental load because you don't feel
Great.
like you're trying to prove something,
Mm.
right? It's like, I don't need to prove to them why I need to take my time to do this. Like they see the value in it. And I think once that mind shift happens, I think that also helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that when it becomes that trajectory of the business becomes a family understanding, it also
Hmm.
helps. Eventually, that turns into the family, probably your children being involved in your business down the road a little bit because of their curiosity. Let's talk. Let's talk about where everyone can find you online. How do they get your products? How do
Sure.
they follow you?
Sure, sure, sure. So we are at purespices.com is our website. So it's PUR Spices, SPICES.com. So that's our website. We always welcome, orders on our website directly. You'll get a handwritten note from me as well. So happy, happy if people purchase from us directly. If Amazon is more your speed, that's also totally fine. You can find all of our items there as well. We do have limited items in grocery stores. So if you are in a location that has a store called Market District, so like Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, you can find us there. And then we're also in a chain called Heinen's, which is in Northeast Ohio as well as Chicago. You can find us there as well. And in terms of our social media handles, all of them are at Pure Spices. So just the name of our company. So PURSPICES. And then we're on Instagram and Facebook. And then we're also on TikTok and we're on LinkedIn as well. I'm trying to think. Yeah. So you can find us there.
Awesome. My last question for you. Last 6 years, it's been a journey, right? 2019, so, we talked about getting over that 3, 4, 5 year mark. Those are
Yeah.
important years, particularly during COVID.
Hmm.
Let's talk about lessons learned. I would say, wish you knew what you knew now. I know every entrepreneur is always like, I wouldn't give it up. It's true. So that's a loaded question. I always ask it, but I know the outcome's the same. So I'm going to ask it a little differently. What are the things you learn the most that are of the most value to you now moving into the future over the last 6 years? What do you think some of those concrete lessons have been in your business?
Sure. So I'm going to give one that's CPG specific. So for a consumer product specifically, know your numbers and know how much everything costs. Uh, And especially when you think about ingredients and some of that, some of that stuff, I think it's super duper important just because to have a viable business, you obviously need to make money. And if you don't know your numbers or you're not conscious of it or you're not like managing them, it becomes very, very challenging to be sustainable. From a more, I'll give you one professional and one personal. So from a professional perspective, be open to taking advice from others and asking for advice. And also, I get a lot of calls from all sorts of people who are trying to sell stuff or who are trying to, and the one thing I'm very, very conscious of is like, don't burn a bridge because you don't know, right? So, like, a lot of times we'll get like like calls from industry people that are trying to sell us something. And I typically just tell them, hey, like not today, but I don't know if I'll need your service down the road or if I'll need your product down the road. And sometimes I actually end up having like they end up being someone that I need to re-engage with and I need something from because I need to buy, like let's say the bottles or let's say labels or something, you just don't know. So don't burn any bridges. Don't, like I think ideally we're all in a place where we're trying to help people. And so, just be mindful of your professional relationships. And then from a personal perspective, again, entrepreneurship is not something that's easy, but it's not something that's unattainable either. So like part of it is just having faith in yourself that you can do it, right? And you're going to get 1,000 no's. It's literally I don't know, the career I feel the most rejected in, but it's okay. Like nobody dies from someone saying no to you, right? Like it's not the end all. You just got to ask somebody else. So I think like learning that, that it's okay if someone, if things don't go the way you expected or you wanted, it's okay. You just have to figure out a different way. Those are my those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I love this actually. Because I've been the food entrepreneur on the other side. I've been the supplier or the vendor side, and
Yep.
definitely been the customer, obviously. And geez, and now on the podcast side or that side of the business or consulting side, I will tell you on the podcast side, I do get a lot of reactions before reading the message or the email or the invitation. Uh,
Uh-huh.
not as much as I used to because the podcast is much more well known globally, but the reaction to the thing, and it just comes from a part because I do think that food entrepreneurs, particularly restaurateurs, I think it's low hanging fruit. I think it's
Mhm.
easy. There's lots of them. It's easy to roll down the street and find a bunch of them. So they're easy targets just because by the volume of them, guys, if I'm going to shoot crabs in a bucket, I'd rather have the fullest bucket, so there is the reaction. I've learned to not take it personally. The first couple of times it happened, I'm like, wow, I don't even know how to react to this. But because it's so far off who you know yourself to be or the character or what you're trying to do or the message you're trying to spread, you're like, I don't even know how to handle this. And I will tell you, guys, it's a very interesting, weird cycle. And it started about maybe 2 years ago as I had a lot of rejections of 2019, 2020, 2021. And then 2023, like now I have everyone coming back that rejected it, that realized maybe they want to be on the show now or they reacted too quick. It's an interesting thing. But, that's where weird things happen over time that are not in our control. They're not in our
Mhm.
power. We just let it go and we do the right thing and we move on. I say thank you. I appreciate the response, which I do because it at least lets me know that I'm doing something wrong here. I need to tweak something somewhere. It's that reaction's not true to everyone, but I get it. I get the strong
Yep.
approach. I get the everyone trying to hard sell you as a food entrepreneur. And that is a
Right.
food entrepreneur, guys, and there's nothing more important than a relationship. Like it's just our lives. We talked about it on this show. We talked about it in our business. My vendors and whatever at the end of the day, you could save me a lot of money. You could save me $1 million a year in a $27 million business potentially. That's a lot of money. But if I don't like
Mhm.
you and you don't know anything about me and you don't care about my employees or my business, I don't care about the money because even the money, giving that extra money to my employees, it's not going to, they're going to be overworked. somewhere along the line, because someone who doesn't build relationships in business, guys, who doesn't see them as it's something that we do more than anything else in our lives, okay? Yes, we have children. Yes, we raise them, but we spend more time in our business with those business relationships, especially as entrepreneurs, than any other part of our lives. So if the person's not willing to invest in that, then they're not a good business partner. It's that simple. And $1 million
Mhm.
you save a year is going to cost you $2 million a year in labor, or $2 million in late orders, or $2 million in whatever. Because when you're having a problem and you need him to fix it, guess what? You don't have a personal enough relationship with him for him to get off his butt on his beach chair when you're having an emergency to fix it for you, especially when you're dealing with a big company. You know, if you're doing
Yeah.
millions of dollars a year, guys, as your companies grow into that, these are the things, the foundations that you're building now. And if you don't build them properly, they are weak parts of your foundation. That's right. Those relationships, those vendors, those things we're talking about. We just talked about a glass manufacturer. Did I always know they were in it for business and money and it wasn't really about doing a lot of things? Did they care about their employees? Yeah, absolutely. Did they care about it? Absolutely. But was the mental toughness there to continue to do the right thing for the industry as a whole? No.
Yep.
You need to be in business, guys. And I learned that through the glass example we just did with entrepreneurs, with businesses that are going to get through it no matter what. And as an entrepreneur, we generally need the fellowship in those relationships, meaning entrepreneurs in our vending, in our farming selections, in our sourcing, in all avenues. Yes, some things are corporations. That's just the way it works. And we hope to build
Mhm.
corporations as entrepreneurs ultimately. But I just want to emphasize, everyone, whatever relationships we choose in the beginning, whatever things we choose to overlook now, it's no different than a personal relationship, because they do come into our businesses. And just like our spiritual maladies or character defects are part of our businesses, so are the individuals we do business with or we allow into our businesses. So
Yep.
it's just
Absolutely.
discernment, guys. Discernment.
Mm.
We're called to do it in all parts of life. We're in order to leave a good life, in order to raise our children, in order to build businesses. So anything that you want to add that I haven't said, Sonya, anything that you want to talk about today or that's in your heart that you want to say out loud, that you may feel that helps anyone, anything like that, the mic is yours as we close up today.
Thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate your time and, giving me the opportunity to kind of share my journey and, you know, my learnings over the past 6 years. But I can't stress it enough. If you have an idea, just go for it, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. Start, iterate, put out different versions of it. And just, if you believe that it's a good idea and you believe it can make a difference and it can help, just put it out there. Like, don't overthink it. That's my last piece of advice.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this to everyone as we close up today, because I love what you said and I want to anchor everything together.
Hmm.
When I started the podcast, guys, I was 21 years in business almost. I've co-packing, built restaurants, supplied restaurants, done POS systems for restaurants all over the world, built restaurants all over the world, supplied food all over the world, hospitals, long-term care homes. Even the people that had trust and I did business with, my rejection rate for them to go onto the podcast was 95%. I remember calculating it and feeling defeated more than I've ever feeling defeated in life ever. Like those numbers to me were of people I knew and I already done business with or had relationships with. So, okay, now that's a good lesson for everyone. Not all relationships translate into other parts of our lives. Okay. That's one lesson. The other lesson I will tell you is that when I had to go out and find people to be on the podcast, it would take me 3,000 to 5,000 communications on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook before I get a person. Guys, 3,000 to 5,000. My rejection rate was enormous on a daily basis. I never felt so defeated in my entire life over anything I've ever done. Now, did it light a fire under me? Sure. Did I make it a mission to release a podcast every week since day one, at least one a week since day one? Yeah, look at the track record. But I will tell you guys, it's the hardest thing I ever did, and it's the thing I did for free. It's the thing I volunteered to do off of a bet to help out a community, to do more because I should be giving back more than I was. But the rejection rate, guys, I don't even know how to tell you what that was like. And even now, if I hit a cold spurt where I know I have to cold calling or reaching out on Instagram or using emails to reach out to people and all that, my rejection rate is still 300 to 1. 6 years later, all credibility, 139 plus countries. I think we just hit 143, actually. I saw Uzbekistan come on there the other day. Welcome, Uzbekistan. I can't even say the name of the country. I will get it eventually. I promise. I will practice. I'll be rhyming it and rapping it in my car just so I get used to it. But I just want to emphasize, everyone, that especially in consumer packaged good, your rejection rate is going to be enormous. And it's all necessary to get an understanding of how to do it better.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a steadfastness in it. And is there something on the other side? In business, yes, I've seen it. And it doesn't mean that we have to work ourselves to death. No, there has to be balance, because stepping away gives clarity sometimes. And Jocko Willink is one of those that talks about pause as the leader. Make sure everyone's set and everything's okay and you're safe and the business is going well, but you need to pick your head up and take a pulse of your situation and understand if the plan that you're on, the journey you're on, and where you're leading is still the right way to go. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to pull an audible, but we need to pick our heads up every once in a while. And the only way to do that, guys, truly, and it's indirectly, it's not about thinking about it. It's not about writing it on your calendar. It's about just integrating it into your life by balancing out the time with your family, your friends, your business, and in my case, God. Because even though I think about my business 24/7, or businesses, and the individuals in it, and I can be very stressed and people don't like being around me when I'm overwhelmed or I can't handle one more thing dumped on me. You know, I'm sure I'm a stress ball or I have a lot of energy that's just very intense. But the truth is that all of it comes down to, you know, what we've talked about in this show. So I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. And I think if Sonya wants to add anything in, I'll give you time to do that off anything I said. But I think we've made the points, and I sort of left it at enough of a cliffhanger for everyone to think about it. So
no, I think it's great. I think it's the right spot to end, and you know, there's a lot to think about. I think it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys for listening in. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Remember, rejection is part of doing business, but eventually, even the ones you reject, the way you handle it, you plant seeds and they do come back around sometimes. And sometimes they might be your best customers or your best podcasters or your greatest advocates, or someone, in some cases, like we've heard on the shows, where your business is going under or something bad happened or your food trailer was stolen. And these are an angel that comes along and helps bring life to your business again through an investment or a donation. So just be aware, guys, that every relationship, every touch point we have, every human we touch, years, decades can go by and they can have huge influence in your life. So thank you guys. I love you guys. We're out.